Hi guys. So our first lecture is all about gender analysis, preventing and responding to different manifestations of gender-based violence. So it's basically all about gender-based violence and how can we use our foundations of gender to be able to see violence to be something gender related. My outline is the following. What is gender based violence or GBV? What are the manifestations of GBV? What are the entry points to address GBV? And finally, how do we prevent gender based violence? Because I think that's very important for you to know. First and foremost, you need to know that gender based violence is a violation of human rights. It's a human rights issue. It is reflected in international agreements such as the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women and other UN declarations. You also need to understand that aside from being a human rights issue, it is a global health issue. It is also a cultural issue, a religious issue, an age issue that is a threat in achieving sustainable development, economic growth, and peace. I think at this point you also need to understand that gender-based violence is not only affecting women and girls. It also affects men and boys. It is a major obstacle in the achievement of gender justice, posing a serious threat to democratic development and public health, and of course, a critical barrier to achieving these three things. Gender equality versus inequality. Gender equality is achieved when women, men, girls, and boys have equal rights, life prospects, and opportunities, and the power to shape their own lives and contribute to society. Otherwise, gender inequality is the absence of all of this and is upheld by unequal power relations and is magnified in gender based violence. Further definitions of gender-based violence. According to SIDA 2015, it is any harm or suffering that is perpetrated against women or girls, men and boys, and has a negative impact on their physical, sexual, or psychological health, development, or identity of the person. But again, I'd like to reiterate that it doesn't only affect women and girls, but also men and boys. The United Nations also defined violence against women as any as resulting in or likely to result in physical, sexual, psychological harm or suffering to women, including threats of such acts, coercion, or arbitrary deprivation of liberty, whether occurring in public or in private life. Gender based violence takes on many forms and can occur throughout a person's life cycle. Many experience multiple episodes of violence that may start in the prenatal period and continue through childhood to adulthood and old age. Examples of different forms of violence that may be experienced throughout a person's life is described in the following box. Where does gender based violence occur? Manifestations of gender based violence. It is often repeated and systematic. Gender based violence occurs in homes, but also in schools, at workplaces, parks, and other public places. It is random, but often, particularly when the perpetrator knows the victim, repeated and systematic. An example of gender based violence is intimate partner violence, also known as domestic violence. International survey shows that at least one-third of women in intimate relationships have experienced violence from their partner. It may take many different forms, different perpetrators throughout the lifetime. Additionally, children who witness violence are indirect victims of intimate partner violence. May mga batas tayo against domestic violence and there's a separate presentation for that. But for now, the World Bank notes that in 1976, only one country had legislation against domestic violence, and in 2013, the number had increased to 76. Isa sa mga naghihinder sa pagpaparusa sa domestic violence is yung tinatawag nating privacy of the home. It results to impunity for violence against women at the hands of family members, domestic helpers also included. To describe the risk factors at each level, since interpersonal violence is experienced differently by people, this framework views interpersonal violence as the outcome of the interaction between many factors at four levels: individual, relationship, community, and then finally societal. The World Health Organization shows that globally 7% of women have been exposed to sexual violence outside a relationship. So ito yung tinatawag nating sexual violence by non-sexual partners. It could be sexual assault, sexual harassment, rape, and gang rape, expressions of misogynistic, xenophobic, racist, and homophobic norms. Other conflict-related gender-based and sexual violence, displacement and heightened tensions within communities and households, poor welfare services and the breakdown of social networks and justice systems. State forces are more likely to be reported as perpetrators of sexual violence than rebels. Again, from research, in some conflicts, sexual violence is used as a weapon of war when state and non-state armed actors use rape and forced pregnancy as instruments of ethnic cleansing and to degrade and humiliate women or girls, and by men by rendering them failed protectors. So, I know you know. I know you heard a lot of presidents or state leaders who, from their mouth, no, sponsored rape and using of sexual violence as an instrument of repression. Meron din tayong tinatawag na violence rooted in tradition. Ito yung mga tinatawag nating harmful traditional practices. The concept has been used with reference to traditional beliefs and customs that underscore control over women and girls and are thus consequences of the value placed on women and girls by the society. Halimbawa, female genital mutilation. Ito yung katumbas ng circumcision sa mga kababaihan that is mostly widely practiced in sub-Saharan Africa and in the Middle East, Northern Africa, Europe, Asia, and some parts of America. It is carried out by traditional practitioners, not by medical personnel. Female genital mutilation or FGM is a clear example of gender-based violence that is sustained by women performing the practice. According to UNICEF, the most frequently cited reason for supporting FGM was social acceptance kasi tinatanggap siya ng mga nagpa-practice nito. And this was also the benefit of FGM most commonly reported. So ito yung mga factors na nagko-contribute ng pagpatuloy na pagtanggap o pag-embrace ng isang practice na napakasakit, very painful for women, and at the same time very degrading. Number 2 is honor violence or violence in the name of honor. This concept referred to against family members conducted with reference to the shame and dishonor a person is supposed to have brought to their family and or community. So example nito yung mga losing of your virginity, adultery, or rumors of the same na nasisira yung iyong puri, no? Kaya siya gender-based violence pa rin. Of course, early or child marriage. In 2014, the State of the World Population notes that every day 39,000 girls become child brides, or about 140 million in a decade. Consequences of early marriage include domestic violence and rape, undesired pregnancies, illegal abortions, inadequate or lacking pregnancy, and antenatal care leading to high-risk delivery and heightened risk of the death of very young expecting mothers. Bukod pa rito sa nag-occur siya sa context ng poverty, that is mostly true in many developing and underdeveloped countries. Of course, violence against the LGBT++ community is also considered a gender-based violence kasi ito yung mga tinatawag nating hate crimes, which is when a person is victimized because of his or her race, ethnicity, religion, gender, or sexual orientation. GBVs in the form of corrective measures, halimbawa lesbian women subjected to gang rapes and forced marriages, transgenders and transsexuals being punished because they threaten traditional norms of masculinity and femininity. At isa pang halimbawa dito, yung mga therapeutic sessions daw sa isang lugar sa Amerika para i-correct yung mga gays or gawin silang straight. Trafficking in human beings is about girls and women, boys and men that in an organized way, with or without consent, are transported to another region or abroad to provide for exploitation. So it's a global phenomenon with countries of origin transiting people in a complex web. It has something to do with economic relations between developed and developing countries na sinasabing nag-earn ng multi-billion dollars. How can we address gender-based violence? Una, alamin natin yung entry points to address gender-based violence. It is a human rights issue. Number 2, tackling gender-based violence is crucial for poverty reduction and economic development. So mahalaga na pagtuunan ng pansin ng Estado ang GBV kasi critical siya para ma-address din natin yung poverty at economic development. Tackling gender-based violence is a key to protect sexual and reproductive health and rights and reverse the spread of HIV. So dapat pinag-uusapan natin to, nire-raise natin siya sa legislation, sa mga platforms of discussion so that we could raise awareness and also improve our sexual and reproductive health. Gender-based violence is also a security concern and a prerequisite for sustainable peace. So mahalaga na ang mga bansa ay may coordinated efforts para ma-address yung problema ng gender-based violence sa mga pamilya, tahanan at komunidad. It's a human rights issue. Survivors of GBV can become active rights holders and can become empowered and transformative human beings if only intermediated by international human rights efforts. It is intersected with poverty reduction and economic development. Because of addressing GBV, we can reduce unwanted pregnancy. We can eliminate the stigma associated with sex and sexuality, and we can reverse the spread of HIV. Halimbawa, kasi nagre-result, ang forced sex, it results to unwanted pregnancy that can have serious repercussions including unsafe abortions and ostracism by family members. So, alam niyo naman yung mga experience ng mga rape victims, no? Gender-based violence is also a security concern as a prerequisite for sustainable peace. Okay, it often escalates dramatically during conflict and displacement. When women are not safe, they cannot fully participate in political life or in peace processes. So, kailangan safe yung mga babae for them to be able to become agents of development. Women have to be engaged, protected, and empowered during conflict and post-conflict settings, including in displacement, in order to lay a strong foundation for recovery and sustainable peace and development. So, mahalaga na bukod sa, bago natin to actionan, no, i-recognize muna natin na nag-exist ang gender-based violence para dito tayo magsimula ng ating susunod na hakbang. How do we prevent gender-based violence? First is to see the victims as survivors, actors, and agents of change. A shift in focus from seeing women as victims to seeing them as survivors, actors, and agents with a strong focus on women and girls, empowerment, and agency. So dapat dapat active agents, hindi sila passive recipients of laws. Dapat participative yung ating pagtingin sa mga kababaihan. Number 2 is to increase women's political participation. Dapat suportado natin yung mga movement na nagsusulong ng mga karapatan at political rights ng mga kababaihan. Number 3 is to increase women's economic empowerment. We have to support efforts that support women economic empowerment. This includes strengthening women's entrepreneurship and employment opportunities, improving women's access to land and property rights, and promoting equal sharing of unpaid care work between women and men, and encouraging universal access to quality education. So dapat we need to support women working on their own, earning their own money, and having financial freedom, just like their spouses. Number 4 is to increase sexual and reproductive health and rights. Such efforts include promotion and protection of women's rights to have control and decide freely over matters related to their sexuality, including sexual and reproductive health, family planning possibilities, and HIV/AIDS prevention. Number 5 is to incorporate men and boys as perpetrators, as victims, survivors, and as agents of change. So, kailangan we often neglect men and boys as survivors of GBV. We need to recognize and address men's and boys' particular vulnerabilities and needs in relation to GBV, especially in the context of armed conflict. So, dapat engaged, partnered yung babae at lalaki para sa pagsulong natin ng pagkilala sa mga gender-based violence scenarios. And finally, number 6, to transform norms and behaviors that underpin GBV or gender-based violence. The logic of GBV is based on gender stereotypes such as ideals linking masculinity to the provider role, macho behavior and violence, as well as ideals linking femininity to submission. So dapat baguhin natin yung norms and behaviors na to para umusad tayo sa lipunan na hindi tayo nababox ng mga stereotypes at mga gender at mga traditional and toxic gender norms. Alright, that ends my presentation. So if you have questions, please do not hesitate to message me right after you listen and watch this presentation. Thank you.